What's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. My name's Usayd Koshan alongside my host, Max Smith. You can follow us on Twitter at Usayd Koshan at Max Smith ESM. Follow Fireside Bears on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Before we get into all the action today, guys, make sure you have subscribed to the YouTube channel. Drop a thumbs up on this video. Make sure you like this video too, because we're covering everything we need to for the Bears when it comes to the 2022 NFL draft. We talked about offensive line. We broke down wide receivers earlier this week too. That video is actually out, so go check that out after you're done watching this video. Check out our weekly podcast as well. This week we had ESPN's very own Courtney Cronin on. She's the newest Bears beat reporter around. She dropped some really good tidbits about the Bears, including the defense, which we'll talk about in a bit here. But before that, Max, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. The Bulls made the playoffs. The Orlando Magic somehow beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. Shout out the Magic. They got a good squad coming up. I think if you're into basketball, the Magic is definitely a team to watch over the next couple of years. Good, solid core group of guys. Bulls, a little banged up, but you know what? It's looking good. White Sox are looking good. Bears may be looking better, but who knows? But it's all going pretty good.
Yeah, it's weird because I feel like Chicago sports goes through this phase where one team is incredibly bad, and then the entire city just sets in, the entire state really just has this widespread depression. And then all of a sudden, it's like one team that's been bad for so long starts looking good, and everyone's just like, oh, yeah, there's something that's going to happen here. But, anyways, getting away from the general sports talk, I mean, we're here to talk Bears, so let's get right into it. Cornerbacks. This is one of the most intriguing positions in Matt Eberflus's defense. I've made this note multiple times, but Matt Eberflus, the 4 years that he was in Indianapolis as the defensive coordinator, only had one first round pick as a cornerback, and even that was Xavier Rhodes, who was not even a first round pick by the Colts. He was a first round pick by the Vikings. So when you talk about some of the cornerbacks that Eberflus had over the years, it's very clear that he made it work with players that were drafted on day 2 and 3. Matt Eberflus's background is two positions: it's linebackers, and then the cornerback and secondary, cornerback and safety as well, making up the entire secondary positional group. So right now, I mean, a lot of people are just so worried about what the Bears are going to do opposite Jalen Johnson. And in a way, I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. Like, cornerback's kind of an overrated need for the Bears this offseason, specifically because Thomas Graham Jr., I think, has a lot of potential. When we talk about your guy, Kendall Wilder, I thought that Kendall disappointed last season because he's a true slot cornerback, and true slot cornerbacks very rarely excel when playing outside the numbers and on the boundaries. It's just Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy were always willing to be comfortable with what the Bears had, and they never really wanted to go ahead and kind of switch things up. So does this cornerback room need work? Yes. But knowing Matt Eberflus's track record when it comes to coaching up these DBs, knowing the potential that Thomas Graham Jr. showcased, because Thomas Graham Jr. is just a box safety that plays cornerback, by the way, because he hits like a safety too, and he's built like a safety. I think the Bears are going to be more than fine at cornerback, but I also think that if the opportunity comes along to add a stud cornerback in round 2 or even a hidden gem, you take that opportunity 11 times out of 10, because this is a league that's driven by elite quarterback play and elite passing offenses.
Yeah, passing offenses, specifically the last season we just had, are everything and everything and anything in the NFL right now. Right? I mean, just look at what the AFC did to bolster the amount of quarterbacks that are currently in that conference. The entire AFC basically sold out to get talent onto their roster, specifically the AFC West. There's an arms race at quarterback, right? Teams are willing to do whatever is possible to get quarterbacks, but also wide receivers. Look at just how much money teams are spending on wide receivers right now. So it's very clear that everybody in the NFL knows that passing game is everything now. And if you don't have an elite quarterback passing to an elite wide receiver, your season is basically over. That's like not an understatement, right? So for the teams that don't have an elite quarterback with an elite wide receiver, what do? Well, you focus in at the cornerback and safety position. You focus in on incredibly athletic, fast sideline to sideline linebackers that can drop into cover schemes, right? That's all you can do. You can't pick a Patrick Mahomes off the tree, or you can't pick a Tyreek, Hill off the tree. Maybe you can, but you have to be willing to send a boatload of picks and money over to the other team. But this is just a reality that the Bears are going to have to face. And you're right. This cornerbacks room isn't terrible. Is it great? No. Is it enough for the division? Yeah, probably, right? But I mean, look, Kendall Wilder, I will say, was a little disappointing. I anticipated he'd have much more of a breakout role, but you're right. He was kind of playing a position that he really shouldn't have been in the first place. This guy's a hard hitter. Is really what it comes down to. He excels in stopping the run game, right, as a run corner. And he's also good at just press. That's like kind of what he's supposed to be doing out there. So ideally, Alan Williams, who's DB coach for the Colts, who Flus handpicked over, will put these guys in positions to succeed. It's the benefit of having a DB's coach as your defensive coordinator is they're going to learn more than they could have, say, with Sean Desai, who, by the way, was also a secondaries coach, right? But what we've seen is Alan Williams did a lot more with what he had than Sean Desai may have with the Bears. That's not a slight at Sean Desai. I'm sure he's going to have a ton of success over in Seattle and for the rest of his career. But what I'm saying is what we saw out of this group last year was not enough. What we could potentially see out of this group next year would ideally and probably will be a huge step up. Just because, like you said, and what we've said for weeks now, is what they were able to squeeze out of that cornerbacks room in Indianapolis was incredible, right? The amount of talent that they were able to get out of those low draft picks and those guys whose careers were struggling. They revived careers. They were on life support. They gave them CPR. It was insane. So the Flus Williams combination should ideally do the same to these young guys. Because remember, this room is incredibly young too. But they're probably going to bring in, I would be stunned if we don't draft a cornerback at 49. If we don't trade that first pick at, 49. Is it 49 or 48? It's 49.
It's 39 and 48.
So it's 48. See, I keep getting 38. Okay, so it's 48. If we don't trade 39, if we don't move up, without a hesitation, I think we're going to draft a cornerback at 48. That's most likely what's going to happen. I will book it.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that I think just really sticks out regarding Alan Williams, who was the DB's coach. I mean, look, let's take it back 7 or 8 years to when Ryan Pace first arrived in Chicago, and John Fox brought over Vic Fangio, who brought over Ed Donatel. I mean, people forget, like, Kyle Fuller was at one point being lauded as a possible player who could break out in 2015 under Vic Fangio, because again, Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel, their specialties were also linebacker and defensive back. And get this, like, that 2016 season was a true testament to what the Bears were basically doing with the secondary, because Kyle Fuller didn't play at all in 2016, and the entire unit was just so depleted. So my point is that this team has seen this before and this fan base has seen it too, in terms of great coaching that was done by Ed Donatel at that point is going to get the absolute best out of defensive backs. Okay, go back to the years that Jim Harbaugh and Vic Fangio were in San Francisco together. Those San Francisco 49er teams, the ones led by Patrick Willis and Justin Reed and Aldon Smith, the strength of those defenses was this front seven. The secondary was just kind of this factor, and they relied on coaching more than anything. So my point is you're seeing kind of the same trend here, and just looking at a lot of our top 5 picks. I mean, every team in the NFL wants a guy like an Ahmad Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati. Well, he's not really a realistic option for the Bears. Neither is a guy like Derek Stingley Jr., because Gardner and Stingley Jr., a lot of people have ranked as 1-2. And I firmly believe that they're both talented enough to be interchangeable. For whatever reason, nobody gives a damn amongst the Bears fan base about Trent McDuffie. Andrew Booth's a great player in coverage from Clemson, really solid in run support, knows how to operate in space, has really loose hips. And because he had the sports hernia surgery, there is an argument to be made there that he could possibly slip down. But the one name that has just consistently been mentioned amongst the Bears fan base, and if we're doing a Bears big board, I think Auburn's very own Rodger McCreary is going to be at the very top of that big board. You're looking at a player who's a great athlete, has really good reactive athleticism, really elusive hips, really good footwork, okay? Just knows and understands the nuances of what a wide receiver is going to do. And McCreary, I think, is a player that anticipates what the wide receiver will do before it even happens. And then I think the versatility that he brings to the table in terms of being able to play inside and outside, that's something you really have to consider. The versatility is such an important component in this defense for a cornerback because, like you've noted, this defense needs an elite slot cornerback. Okay. And then having a player that you can just move around, like you're going to move the rest of the linebackers around, which is ultimately going to dictate whether the Bears play nickel or dime on given downs. You know what? That's really valuable too.
Rodger McCreary is probably one of the best options for the Chicago Bears out of any of the draft picks. He will fall in our laps, essentially. That's most likely going to happen just because of the way that this draft is shaping up and shaking out. He is going to end up in a position for the Bears to draft him. He is a perfect nickel, especially for this scheme. The dude is ridiculously fast and is able to keep up with wide receivers. He doesn't have, he's a 4.5 40. It's not a 4.4. It's not as fast as some of these other guys, but his first step is insane. This guy you can't shake him. He's everything you possibly want. He's going to be a day one impact. That's just who he is. And it's crazy that he's going to fall this far down because you may have some of these bigger name guys, but I said yesterday in our video about wide receivers and just how deep that tree is. This one's not as deep because this one's a little more front loaded. But this guy, Rodger McCreary, if some of these other names weren't at the top, he would be an easy first round pick. He's probably going to go middle second just because it's just the way it's shaping out, which is great for us. It makes zero sense for us not to look at him. The only negative you can say about the guy, right, is his size outside, right? Is he going to be able to play down the field with some of these bigger guys? Is that something we're going to be able to see him do? Should we even imagine that though? Could we put him in a position for him to play that? No, he's going to play the nickel. He's going to play the inside because of his size and his speed, right? So that negative can be thrown out the window because if there's good coaching, which we have now, there's zero reason he should be playing on the outside because of his size. And his skills are within the hash anyways. So that's going to – and imagine this guy with the linebacking core that we have and we will continue to develop. Roquan Smith and this guy playing within the hash is going to be insane. You're not going to be able to throw the ball in the middle of the field. It's going to be ridiculous. So if the Bears have an opportunity to draft Rodger McCreary and we don't, I am going to literally pound my desk so hard it's going to break watching the draft. I don't even want to talk about how upset. I might cry a little. Maybe I'm being over dramatic, but this is a present. And if we don't take it, I'd be stunned, especially how valuable this position is in the league now and how valuable this position is to Eberflus's scheme.
Yeah, I'm just going to go out and say this. I mean, imagine a trio of McCreary, Roquan Smith, and Nicholas Morrow lining up just right next to each other. I mean, teams would legitimately be at a disadvantage because we know what Roquan Smith is. You did a great breakdown of McCreary, and then you look at Nick Morrow, who was actually a safety in college. So him playing the Mike linebacker spot, yeah, he's not as big as typical Mike linebackers like a Brian Urlacher or a Ray Lewis that people are used to seeing, or even a Zach Thomas. For those of us that were actually watching football in the 2000s, not today's generation, that for whatever reason likes to think Bobby Wagner's some way, somehow this super elite linebacker who's a generational talent, because I mean, Bobby Wagner pad stats, but he's not necessarily a super elite linebacker compared to what I'm used to watching. But that's anyways beside the point. But yeah, Morrow's not as big, but he can definitely move, okay, like a damn safety, which is so valuable in itself. Now, the next guy I think that is really worth looking at is Florida's very own Care Elam, okay, who's got some NFL ties to a solid player in both man and zone coverage. I think that what sticks out regarding Elam is there are times where he's perfectly able to track the ball. So you're looking at day one starter. There's times he looks somewhat lost, but he does have the necessary athleticism. And being whatever 6'1", 6'2", he's one of the longer cornerbacks in this class. In terms of his arm length, that's really valuable because ultimately with that, teams just value length in cornerbacks nowadays. And your wingspan, your arm length, all that stuff makes a difference as to just how teams grade you out. Elam's a really smart player too, and what he doesn't necessarily have is the ability to be super. He doesn't have elite athleticism. He doesn't have the best long speed either, but he makes up for it with his football IQ as well as just his length and how tough and physical and aggressive he's willing to be.
Yeah, I'll even push back a little on that athleticism because I think this guy can run with the most of them as well. He's also tall. He's just a big dude. And if we have concerns about McCreary on the outside, which won't play, this is a ridiculous opportunity to put somebody on the outside. Elam's strengths rely in his coverage abilities, right? Like you said, with his IQ. The dude knows, he understands game of football, right? And sometimes your cornerbacks need to understand the passing offense just as much as the quarterback does, because that's how you're able to combat it. You need to know where these wide receivers are going. You need to understand the route concepts. You need to understand how where the quarterback can throw the ball. If he's getting pressure, which side does he like to throw it the most? These are things that Elam knows, and these are the things that he prides himself on. And this is why he's looking at a late first, early second round draft pick, right? This is how you get yourself in these positions, kids. If you're trying to play in the NFL, it's what are the details? What makes me better than the guy lining up across from me, right? But Elam has that natural size. He could stand to, fit that frame a bit. There's some worries there, especially in the tackling. But his coverage is there. His athleticism, maybe not as good as some of the other guys in the class, but it's there. And this is also a guy who remind me if I'm wrong, is pretty young too. He's going to grow. He's going to learn. He's going to get better. There's nothing but upside. This guy's ceiling is a lot higher than some of the other guys in this class. I'd still prefer McCreary just because of the scheme fit. But Elam's right up there.
Yeah, Elam is such an interesting case study because it's like I said, I mean, he's not the greatest athlete in the world, but there's more than enough there to warrant just being a really solid NFL player. And those details make the biggest difference. And I think people get so caught up on, speed, athleticism, all that kind of stuff. Like sometimes the little details just matter. There's players in this league like a Keenan Allen, or even I'd say a former Bears cornerback and Kyle Fuller. Never the greatest athletes, but they've made names for themselves simply because they've been really good technicians. Now, kind of getting to the third round here, I would say that Kyler Gordon, who is from Washington, is a name that a lot of people don't know because it's very clear that some people just haven't done their homework on cornerbacks this offseason. But Gordon is really solid in coverage, but I think his greatest strength just lies in having really good ball skills, and then also just being a force in the run game and really bringing the hammer down. Like when I watched him, his ability to operate as a run defender on the edge is one of the best in this class.
Yeah, there's Kendall Wilder in him, right? Which I think is really interesting. Is that you're basically getting the same player there, maybe slightly better, just because of the talent that the guy's been surrounded over in the pack versus Wilder, who's a Georgia Southern. No disrespect to Georgia Southern. Again, it's just you're probably running against faster receivers, probably bigger linemen at Pac-12 schools, but it could be wrong because it's the West Coast. But Gordon is probably going to have a higher skills ceiling coming out of college than Wilder has. There's still a lot of potential for Wilder, and there's a reason why he's still on this roster. And I think that there's talent evaluation is probably going to help him out because there's talent there, and he works really hard. At least he posts about how hard he works more than some other players on the Bears. But no, there's a lot there. And again, this is a guy that if he falls and we can take him, there's zero reason why we shouldn't. Like this is a best man up mentality where all of these guys are going to be contributors. All of these guys are gamers. All of these guys are day one impact players, right? Are they, Kyle Fullers? No. Some maybe McCreary is, but they're not going to be these guys that you're going to be going out and buying their jerseys, after their first or second season, going, yeah, this guy is the next everything. Probably not going to happen, but their impact, and they're going to help this defense, and they're going to make something where we really haven't had like a whole lot of talent at since the departure of Kyle Fuller. And yeah, Jalen Johnson's there, right? And that's fantastic. And he's still promising, and he's still developing, and he's still really good. So there's an opportunity for a tandem there that the Bears haven't seen in a very, very, very long time. But if we can bolster that talent at the position, would be great. Another late round guy that I think slid in the fall, or at least in the rankings, and has been kind of under a lot of people's radar, is Jalen Amore Davis. This guy got the starting nod at the University of Alabama. This guy's a second team all SEC. This guy's legit, right? He's a real talent, and he's pretty low on a lot of people's big boards. And I still don't understand why. Maybe there's some concerns about injury here or there. But the dude's athletic. The dude sits with receivers. The dude hits hard. There's a reason, right? He was starting in a Saban defense. I have a feeling he's probably going to get drafted in the mid-third to like a Patriots or maybe a Indianapolis. And he's going to be a stud. It's just, where is he going to get picked up? And I think there's a possibility he can end up on the Bears as well, because his play style and his attitude absolutely fits with the loaf system and the hit system.
And hopefully the M&M system too.
Yeah, right.
So, okay, there's something that has to be said, is that Ian Cunningham was with the Ravens, and we know that the Ravens love their Alabama players. And more specifically, we know that the Ravens love their Alabama defensive backs. So I would not be surprised to see a guy such as a Josh Joby or even a Jalen Armour Davis end up in a Bears uniform next season and for the next couple years. Now, one of the big things I love about Armour Davis is just the measurables that you're looking at. I mean, you're talking about a player that's just bigger than I think the average cornerback. He's 6'1", right around 200 pounds, has got about 31-inch arms, okay, and then 9.25-inch hands. That's massive. And you combine that with a 4.3 40-yard dash. I don't know why we're not talking about him more. And then he certainly knows how to get up and get after the football because he's got like a 35-inch vertical. What people have to understand regarding Armour Davis is that he's a player that is still growing. Okay. You see that long, just the cornerback frame, like I touched on. I mean, the one red flag that I have of his is that he's only been a real starter for one season. So why he was on the bench is because, again, Alabama's so loaded. So some of these guys only get one real year of playing time before they say, let's just make the jump to the NFL. But they end up being more solid than the rest. Armour Davis's 4.3 40-yard dash time sticks out because that right there is speed, which is going to allow him to basically close on a lot of these faster routes and just keep up with a lot of these faster wide receivers too. The contact that he's willing to absorb, but also the contact he's willing to dish out, means he's such a hard hitter that he's a tone setter you want in your defensive back room.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this guy reminds me of pre-injury Eddie Jackson, right? I mean, crazy they're from the same program. I mean, Alabama produces talent. It's just, you can't be the best program in the National Football or College Football League and the NCAA and not produce incredible NFL pro level talent. And that's what Nick Saban does. And, yeah, you basically touched on everything for Armour Davis, and there's really no reason that if, again, he falls in the opportunity that we shouldn't pick him up. And Ian Cunningham is an interesting connection. Also, I think that Eddie Jackson connection. Obviously, the two didn't play with each other, but you could see a pretty SEC filled Chicago Bears defense between some Georgia Bulldogs and some Alabama Tide.
Yeah, I want to talk about a player that one of my good friends, Cole Topham, is covering because Cole's currently a beat writer for Arizona State University. Now, for the Sun Devils, I mean, Chase Lucas, the cornerback, is a name that I've had my eye on for quite some time. Okay. I think with Chase, what is that he's one of the hidden gems of this draft class. He's whatever, 5'11, 185 pounds. So solid build and frame for a cornerback. But what I really think sticks out about Chase is just the closing speed that he has when it comes to bringing down these these receivers. Is Lucas a great athlete? Absolutely not. But where he makes up for it is just how smart of a football player that he is, as well as just his ball skills, okay, and then just how competitive he is. Now, he doesn't necessarily play the fastest. That's one knock against him, which could force him to kind of switch to the inside possibly at the next level. But certainly he's shown that, hey, look, I have really good skills in man coverage. And then in zone coverage, if you give me an area of the field to cover, I will be best at that, but I will excel mostly in zone coverage in the slot.
Yeah, I think specifically in zone, any prospect that's going to be able to plug and play in the zone is probably going to do incredibly well in this defense. That's just moving forward. We still have a good amount of man guys that I think are transitioning out and maybe transitioning over. And speed kills, right? But also so does IQ, especially at the cornerback position. Odds are the wide receiver is going to be faster than you, and you're just going to have to live with that. But where can you make up in regards to where your footwork? What steps can you get? How can you get from point A to point B just a little bit quicker so that you can keep up with them? That's huge. Those are intangibles, right? And that's what makes a cornerback. And also the fact that maybe they're not as good as catching the football, because if they were, they'd probably be wide receivers, but they're not. So they're cornerbacks. But you can always have, if you ever have any of those corners that have incredible ball skills and great hands, that's a plus for any team, and especially in a team that prioritizes interceptions more than touchdowns, which might be what the Bears look like this year.
Yeah, so I think just overall my takeaways from this cornerback class is it very top heavy? Yes. But then again, the upside that the Bears are going to come across on day 2 and 3 is certainly hard to ignore. And it's something that you have to be willing to take a risk and a chance on that upside, because oftentimes what tends to happen in the NFL draft, and I think this is the case for all 256 picks, is just that you're trying to project what a player is going to turn into versus what they did in college. So these players like a Chase Lucas, like a Jalen Armour Davis, I would even throw Alabama's very own Josh Joby in there, a guy like a Kyler Gordon, Kerry Elam, or even Rodger McCreary. I mean, there's immense potential here for Chicago to go ahead and find Jalen Johnson a legitimate running mate. And then do not discount the names that are already on the roster, mainly Thomas Graham Jr.
Yeah, that's all a great summary. If you can pair talent with talent, you have a winning formula. Like, it's that simple. And there's still talent on this roster at the position. It's just going to be really interesting to see if we can bring in any more. And then, of course, when it comes time to evaluate that talent over the offseason, specifically how it pairs with this new defensive scheme. But the future is bright for the cornerback position in Chicago Bears. It might be, a little hard, but it's getting there.
It certainly is. And so we're going to get out of this thing now, but make sure you're following us, guys, on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at FireSideBears. If you like the video, we would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you're dropping a thumbs up on the video, too. You can follow myself and Maxx on Twitter at MaxSmithESM and at Usayd Koshal. We are going to be back, I think, whenever we're back. I have no idea, but we're going to be talking linebackers and tight ends as well. And then we'll do safeties too, just because, again, the Bears have some significant needs on the defensive side of the ball. So lots of positional previews coming your way, guys. But just continue to tune in, keep it locked in right here, and we're going to educate you so that the next time your family gets together for those NFL draft parties and the Bears are on the clock, you're going to be the smartest person in the room, and we genuinely mean that.
Yeah, and educate us. If there's any prospects that you want us to look at and that you're really high on, let us know, comment below, and we'll definitely take a look at them and let you know what our thoughts are.
Absolutely, we will. But for now, guys, bear down and peace.